Hello, good evening, and welcome to the TNT Show. We are now in our second century of shows, as regular members of our audience will know. And again, I'm John Drummond, your host for the next 60 minutes. And again, thanks to you, the TNT Show and Indy Live are growing and delivering more exciting shows. And you can watch the TNT Show on indylive.net. It's streamed out on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Plus, you can access all the previous shows on YouTube. Now, and this is hugely important, absolutely important, right? Make a note of this, please. If you've got a scrap of paper, or if you're listening to this, whatever you're doing just now, make a note of this. This is hugely important. We need you to donate to Indy Live to keep this channel doing what it's doing, informing, educating, and hopefully entertaining. You'll see the details on the screen. Please give us your support. Donate whatever you can, as many times, please, to keep providing these shows for you. But it can't be done on the square root of absolutely nothing. We have to have, and we do depend on your support. Thank you. I'm going to mention this again at the end, but I'd like you please to think about this seriously and support Indy Live. You know, it's been another great day for British democracy. Boris Johnson this afternoon was asked by the Parliamentary Liaison Committee, who said the following, Prime Minister? Can you tell us who said the following? When a regime has been in power for too long, you can rely on the leaders of that regime to act solely in the interests of self-preservation. Who authored that quote? Johnson was asked. He volunteered, was it Cicero? No, said the questioner. It was Boris Johnson. It was you, Prime Minister. It's not just his short-term memory that's faulty. It's all parts of his memory by the looks of it. Tonight, we are talking to a special guest. We'll be discussing Scotland, business, music, and much else besides with Mark Breingan, who's also known on social media as Big Marky. Now, he's here for a full hour, so get your questions in, and because we'll be taking your questions live. This is another big difference between shows that you might see on the BBC, produced at enormous expense. They don't want to hear your questions. We do. We're different. We want to hear your questions. TNT stands for The Nation Talks. So we want you to talk with us the same way that Big Marky and I will be talking tonight. So no license, no problem. You can watch the show, as I said earlier, at any time on YouTube. Now to our guest. Tonight, The Nation talks to Big Marky. Thanks for joining us, Marky. Now, I know that you have COVID right now. So we're particularly grateful that you're able to join us. How are you feeling?
Better today. Yesterday was torture, but I'm over it, or over the worst of it, hopefully.
Okay. So you're better today, but you're not better together.
Never.
Okay, thanks for joining us, Marky. This is one of the rare opportunities we get a chance to talk to somebody who's with a business background, who's active in the independence movement. Now, a bit of background. You've been in the shipping field for quite some time, is that right?
Yeah, basically when I was 16, my mum said, you're not leaving school unless you get a job. So this was back in the Thatcher time. So I went along for a YTS interview. They gave me the job right there and then. I thought, oh, I've nailed it. I've done, but little did I know that really they were just desperate to give anybody a YTS just to get them on the books and get their training. And they found me a placement with a P&O firm. And I started there when I was 16, basically cut my teeth in European transport back when we were, before the EU was created. So everything was a Friday. It was geared up for a Friday where all your shipments were loaded on a Friday. and then you had to work until about 10 o'clock on a Friday night just to do the customs documents. After that, I moved to a Japanese firm, got involved in sea freight. And then after that, I moved into projects as well as chartering. And so I've sort of covered all areas, worked on projects all over the world, and sort of see the failings that we've got in our infrastructure in Scotland, because it's just been totally sidelined.
Bit trouble with our internet connection tonight. Let me see if I can fix it. There we are. I think that's better now. Sorry, I missed a few parts of what you just said. I wonder if you could just repeat those.
Well, I've worked, when I got into projects, I've worked basically on projects coming all over the world for the oil industry, for the steel industry. I even did a project for an American space firm that I'm under an NDA. I'm not allowed to disclose. I'm not even allowed to share a picture of it, which was, when you do something really, really you're quite proud of, and you're not allowed to even show a picture of it. It's like, but some of the projects have been quite complicated. I've moved a steel mill from Rhode Island in America into the Black Sea, into Georgia, and then that was transferred overland down into Baku. I've worked for a lot of freight forwarders whose customers are oil industry, the steel industry. Basically, if you name it, I've moved it.
Well, that's very interesting. Here's a question that's, I suspect, on everyone's mind just now. How has Brexit affected what you do?
It's a disaster. Just trying to get even European hauliers interested to come over here, it's like pulling teeth. They don't want to come. They don't want to get subject to customs delays, hold-ups, and even some, if you take what's called hot shots, which is basically if you've got a pallet or two that's really urgent, there used to be guys that would just take them over to the continent all the time. All after Brexit, a lot of people just went, customs documents, nah, don't want to do it. So your capacity has been cut on the carrying side, and the costs have went through the roof, which puts pressure on companies to be able to sustain these costs and keep their products competitive.
Is there any connection, Mark, between what you've just outlined and the fact that Lurpak is on the shelves for between £7 and £9 a carton?
Well, Lurpak was a big brand, so it's always going to be here, but your costs are going to go through the roof.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big brand, but it never ever sold for £7 before.
No, it wouldn't. That's the cost of being able to buy a product you like from the European country. Because what people don't think about with trade, and trade sort of falls into a big, almost a geopolitical thing as well, because if you're going to trade sort of products that are perishable or low cost, you normally trade with your closest neighbours, because they can't sustain either a really long transit or the cost of moving them. And since COVID's put huge pressures as well on the supply chain, because I think right now there's about 100 and odd container ships sitting off of Shanghai. So all your containers are stuck in boats to go into Shanghai, to come back. There was a ship recently that had just spent about 90 days waiting to get into Shanghai to load. It's went across the Pacific to Long Beach, and it's estimated that it'll be there for 110 days. So not only have we got Brexit, we've also got the supply chain is meltdown across the world.
Why is that?
Well, do you know that you would think that the supply chain was geared up, so when the Chinese were making full output, containers were moving. But when they started to lock down, it's like a bottleneck. And then it just creates a wave that the pressure just goes back. And everything switched to PPE. The government, they handed out PPE contracts, and there's probably, was there about 10,000 containers that were sitting in storage in Felixstowe that they bought that weren't fit for purpose. So they were paying £1 million a day almost on the storage costs for the containers.
So let me get this right. The British government is paying right now for containers sitting in Felixstowe doing nothing.
They were, I think, actually, they've started to burn the PPE that wasn't.
They started to burn it.
That's what I've heard, yeah, that the PPE that wasn't fit for purpose has been disposed.
And this is the outfit that says you couldn't manage on your own. Boy, oh boy, you know. We might come back to shipping in a second because, I mean, personally, I find it very interesting that we live in a connected world in the way that you've just described it. And we're not always aware that that is the case because particularly when you live on an island, you get the impression that what happens on the island is pretty much the start and finish of things. But you've just outlined fairly graphically that that's not the case. You're hugely influenced by what happens in terms of supply chains, container ships, and all the rest. We'll come back to that in a second, perhaps. Tell us a bit about your music, Marky.
Well, actually, again, it goes back to when I was 16. I wanted to be a rock star, but my mum says you need to get a job. So I went out and started to work. But I've always been interested in playing guitar and writing music, and I've been in a few bands. And then about 2015, I put together a band with some guys locally, and my friend Stuart McCready helped us produce it. And then just in 2019, as COVID hit, there was no gigs, there was nothing. So what did I do? I still kept writing music, and I found there was this online site where you could chat with people from all over the world. Got in touch with a guy from Nashville, and he started singing on, or had some ideas for some of the music, and started singing. So we worked remotely with him. There was a guy in San Francisco, plus one of my friends from Scotland. He wrote some songs as well. So once I had everything recorded and put together, once the sort of lockdown had sort of finished, I went back to my friend Stuart McCready and said, can you help me, or could you produce this for me? And he spent a lot of time just really getting a good professional finish to the tracks.
And what's your group called?
Giant Head Collective.
Giant Head Collective.
Yeah.
And if people in the audience want to access your music, how do they do that?
It's everywhere: Spotify, YouTube,
okay.
Deezer, Apple Music, all the digital platforms nowadays. It's easy to find. It's just getting people to consume it is a hard part.
Well, this sort of thing helps, because there'll be a lot of people around the place who say to themselves, I've never heard of Giant Head Collective.
Yeah, that's the thing. There will, but
I have to ask you, Marky, why Giant Head Collective?
It goes back. One of my favourite artists is a guy called John Hyatt, and about 2003 came out with an album called The Tiki Bar Is Open, and I got into tiki heads, so I started collecting tiki heads, and my favourite one was always the Moai, the Easter Island, because I thought they're simplistic and they look really. So I just get carried away with that, and now everything I've got's got a tiki head or a giant an Easter Island head on it.
Well, these things are fascinating. I'd love to talk to you about Easter Island, but we probably don't have time. So people can get your music on Spotify and the other channels. How many people are in your collective, Giant Head Collective?
Probably the amount of people. There was about 7 contributed to the latest album, because I was just sort of bringing people in for specific songs, or I wrote a lot more than what we put out, and it was what caught somebody's ear, and they said, "Well, I like that tune, I can do this," and they would go away and do their thing and send me back their tracks, and it was whittled down to sort of 15 songs. There's still a lot that I need to finish. I need to find the right people to finish, or somebody that can pick up on the vibe, because I like Americana and country and sort of southern rock, because basically it's like Scottish folk music. They've got elements of that in it. It's when all the Scots went over to America, they went, let's find some mountains, let's make some whiskey, and they took their music, and you hear it. You can definitely hear it on. It's right in the roots of sort of country music and bluegrass, and
it's remarkable. I know exactly what you mean. In fact, I watched somebody doing a program on the Appalachians and the folks who lived up there, and he said that Scottish music fitted very well because these people came from the old country, and besides, everyone there likes getting drunk and just playing music.
Basically, they went there to be left alone. Really, that's what we want to have a drink, play our music, leave us alone. So they went there, and then probably about 50 years later, the British Redcoats come in and said, "No, you're having too much fun, and where's the revenue for all the whiskey you're making?"
Oh yeah, and then shortly after independence in 1776 or thereabouts, the American government had to put down a riot because people were making their own booze.
Yeah.
And so the first enemy that the new independent army fought was against its own citizens.
It's always about the money. It's always about the money.
Rob Taylor, going back to shipping for a second, sort of trade in particular, is asking, what are your thoughts on whether a hard border would be needed after independence?
And
how would that
I don't have a problem. I don't think there would be a hard border, because when it happens, there'll be negotiations. But the thing is, a border is a demarcation of an economic zone. So everything in our border, we control the revenue of.
Sure.
But there will be a negotiation. And if you look around the high streets and the supermarkets, retail, insurance, banking, they're all going to want access to our economy.
Yeah, but I agree with that. I mean, I can't think of a business person, though they may say different during a referendum campaign, who would voluntarily want to give up 10% of the revenue. It makes no sense to me, particularly in straitened times when the economy is not growing, where there's recession looming or actually in place. It makes absolutely no sense to say, right, I'm going to have a self-denying ordinance to cut off 10% of my market. However, the business community operates within civil society, and civil society is controlled by politicians. So there is a possibility, I'll put it no greater than that, that the negotiations would have to be clearly focused on making sure that whatever border did exist, and one would imagine that if Scotland were to re-enter the EU would insist upon a border of some kind. So there would have to be a sort of Scottish protocol, if I can call it that, developed. You think?
Certainly in terms of standards, the EU are going to say, well, if you've got to make sure that any standards that if you import goods from England to Scotland to rework, to put over there, meets the standards. I don't have a fear of if Scotland maintains an EU standard that we can't trade into England, because if you make something that's superior in standard, you can sell into any market.
Yeah.
What you can't do is sell an inferior product into a market with a higher standard. So immediately, England's at a disadvantage to trade into Scotland.
Precisely. So I can imagine business people during a referendum campaign being persuaded to want to talk about this and to say exactly what you've just said. If Scotland becomes independent, that's not a major problem for us. The problem for us would be if Scotland repealed Brexit, because then what would happen is we wouldn't be able to sell into Scotland because our standards, by the whole point of Brexit in large part was to reduce standards.
Exactly. That Brexit was about trashing standards, and that's what the internal market bill's about as well. So
wouldn't the problem be, though, if Scotland, an independent Scotland, were to rejoin the EU, then that would definitely militate against products in England being sold in Scotland, because the EU standards would be higher by definition.
If we were in the EU, then yeah, we would have to adopt their standards. But I think we need EFTA. We stick with EFTA for the first few years. Let us get a government. We don't even know who will be our first government.
Sure.
There is this complete fallacy that the first government of Scotland will be the SNP. It probably will, but the whole point of independence is for democracy.
Yeah.
And I can guarantee you that all the unionist parties and the Douglas Rosses and the Anas Sarwars are saying, oh, no independence. As soon as we vote for independence, they'll be the first people, instead of saying, you can't, they'll be saying, we need to. They'll have their opinions. They'll have their policies.
Yes. Well, certainly if we look at historical precedent, we find that independence is a bit like success. Failure is an orphan. Success has many fathers. Yep. I think independence would also have many fathers if it were successful, but if it were to happen, because it's in everyone's interest. If you're a Tory, for example, or somebody centre-right in Scotland, there is no home for you if you believe in independence. And so therefore, what you do is you have to stay at home or vote for a party that you don't necessarily feel sympathetic to. But after independence, I can imagine a whole bunch of right of centre people forming their own Scottish party to represent their interest. The fact that it hasn't happened until now is a bit of a mystery to me. But because we're the only, Scotland is about the only independence-seeking country that doesn't have a right of centre independence party.
That baffles me too, because to me, independence isn't a left thing or a right thing. It's about it's taking your own decisions. It's controlling your own economy and working for the best for your own people.
Yeah. Well, a slightly different question now, but related. Lars of Mars, as he styles himself, or she styles himself, wants me to ask you about the potential of Hunterston deep water in the Firth of Clyde.
Oh, for what? Because
presumably it would have potential of some kind.
You need to think of this from a ship owner's perspective. Hunterston is a deviation of about 3 or 4 days from the English Channel. So your container ships come from the Middle East, the Far East, West Africa, South America. They'll all come in through the English into the English Channel. To come up to Hunterston's about a 3 or 4 day deviation up and back. And is it to unload containers? Because why would they want to come to the west coast of Scotland to unload containers to then have to put them back in a ship to take them all the way round to Rotterdam or Antwerp or Hamburg or Denmark? It doesn't make sense. Okay. The owners just want as little calls as possible, and that's why they'll always call Rotterdam or Antwerp. It's about cost.
Doesn't the equivalent logic though apply if the shipments are coming from across the Atlantic? Because then Hunterston would be closer, wouldn't it?
There is only one service that comes out of America into the West Coast, and that goes into Liverpool, and that's a RoRo service, but ACL. When Felixstowe got chock-a-block with the containers of PPE, it went into meltdown. So the Danish ship owner, Maersk, they temporarily went round to Liverpool. But again, why would they involve all the costs of moving all the containers up from England to Scotland to put out when they could go to an English port?
Yeah, fair point. I just wondered what volume there was across the Atlantic, and what you're saying isn't a great deal.
Well, there's a fair amount of volume, but what you need to remember is logistics is actually a really, really cost-focused operation. So why would you pay £700 per container for England, where a majority of the cargo would originate, to move to Hunterston just to catch a boat out of there when they could go out of Felixstowe?
Sure.
Again, if they're talking about Hunterston, and I've seen it, that was it the Orkneys or Shetlands, where there was some big study that we should create a huge container terminal in Orkney and just take a ship in there and we'll unload it and then we'll feed it out to Rotterdam and all the other European. Why would the owner not just take his ship into Rotterdam and unload 70% of his cargo, which is going, because Rotterdam feeds central Germany, Switzerland, Belgium. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So there's probably very limited opportunities then for Scotland to be some sort of idealized container environment, even if the cost of unloading was less, etc., etc., etc.
Good luck getting the cost of stevedore in Scotland down for a start. No, it just, in terms of logistics.
Okay. Are there any advantages, Mark, in an independent Scotland that would accrue in terms of your business?
I would hope, and in terms of an independent Scotland, would we see our manufacturing grow, we produce more, we import and we export more. But that's a long-term thing. I'm thinking of independence for my children to see the benefit. Not anybody that thinks we're going to vote for independence and 2 years later it's going to be yippee. It's going to be a long, because the infrastructure has been neglected for so long.
Yeah. I want to ask you about the comment on social media, and you can disavow this if you like. People are concerned that Boris Johnson is proving to be reluctant to leave Number 10. And there's been some comment on social media that says, send Big Marky down to drag him out.
I don't think he could. I don't think he could persuade. I'm surprised that he's never been confronted in his life, because he's just he's an arrogant, self-centered. You even see it when he's challenged and he's forced to apologise or whatever. The way he looks at people, he looks at people as if they're below him. How dare you expect me to apologise for this, or who are you to demand this from me? And that's just the problem with the system down there, is they allow these people into power.
I mean, it's intriguing in many senses, but many of the people requiring Johnson to resign tonight were more than happy to support him scarcely 2 or 3 weeks ago in a vote of no confidence. So what the heck has changed in a couple of weeks that wasn't representative of everything that had gone before? I did get a chance to watch Johnson talking to the liaison committee this afternoon. And what struck me was his complete and utter inability to take on board criticism. His view appeared to be, I see that you're saying this, but it's got nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
People say, why don't you resign? And he's saying, I understand why you're saying that, but it's got nothing to do with me. And you think, it's like watching somebody dissociate in front of you.
Yeah, but they're masters of that. It's a case of, we'll do this and we need to do that, and as soon as you say, how are you going to do this, like leveling up, it's going to be great. It's all slogans, and it's never backed up with absolutely any concrete funding or intent. Excuse me, sorry. Sorry.
That's okay.
It's a case of, who is it in England that votes in these people and forces these people on us actually buy into this? Do they actually scrutinise what they're doing?
Well, I think they do. To be fair, I mean, I'm not in a position to speak for people south of the border who vote Tory, since I'm neither south of the border nor am I a Tory, and I've never voted Tory. But if I had to guess, I don't. I mean, when we interviewed the people from Plaid Cymru a couple of weeks ago, I was rather surprised to learn that the councillor who was on the show from Carrie Hunter from Wrexham said that her area of Wales voted for Brexit. She feels most people now regret that decision. And I then asked her, well, what motivated these people to vote for Brexit? And she seemed to believe, rightly or wrongly, that it was the anti-immigration theme.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It's basically, for decades, basically since Thatcher, the UK has went from an industrial, I don't want to say nation because there's 4 nations, but in terms of a state. It went from an industrial estate where we made things to a financial. Industrials became financiers. Everything was offshored. Manufacturing was put out to China. We'll design it and we'll just send it out there and they'll make it. Not thinking that not only they're going to make it, but they're going to copy it and they're going to remake it with their own brand and they're going to sell it and then they're going to outsell everything that you could ever do. Because if you actually look at what China produces, you look at something, go, wait a minute, that's a JCB or that's a crane, a leap year crane, or
I can see why that happens, and you could say if you in a capitalist system, why shouldn't the Chinese try and undercut somebody else? That's the whole basis of capitalism, is that people should feel free to do whatever they want, hopefully within reason and within some sort of moral framework.
Yeah, capitalism. In theory, capitalism works, but where it fails is the governments don't put in sufficient controls to ensure that their population isn't exploited by that capitalism.
Yeah. I mean, what you're arguing for effectively is moral capitalism, which is
exactly. Everybody, even the most ardent socialist, if you ask them what they want, is they want more money.
Yes,
but they and quite rightly so. Everyone deserves to work a job that pays for their food, pays for the roof over their heads, feeds their children, clothes their children. They can have their PlayStation Plus or whatever, and have a bit of safety net. That's what we should aim for.
Now, let me pose this question, because it'll be in the minds of every single unionist who's in the audience tonight, and we have a number. And it's this: if, as you say, independence is going to not produce any sort of utopia overnight, could take years for it to attain the levels that you would like, why should people who have these aspirations that you've just outlined have to put up with years of reduced living standards so that this utopia can be reached?
But they won't be suffering reduced living standards. If you stay in the UK, it's going to be eternal. It's going to be eternal decline. Scotland is going to suffer continued brain drain forever. We won't be able to offer our young people the prospects that they deserve. What will happen is we'll spend all our time or all our money putting youngsters through university, and they leave.
Yeah.
They leave before they've even contributed to the society that gave them the free education. So from when we vote independence, basically you're starting off from where we are now, and then you tweak it and you tweak it and you tweak it and you tweak it. There will be a quick bounce from going back, if we join EFTA, straight into the access to the EU. If you look, Northern Ireland is actually doing better since they put a border down between the UK and Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
So a border between Scotland and England, it doesn't fear us.
Okay. What's your assessment of how well the Scottish government is doing in terms of business support?
I think it's a hard one because it might be a poison chalice well, not a poison chalice, but it's out with really their scope of competence, shall we say, that they don't have the powers to really address what we need, other than they might be able to do something with rates but they don't have the ability to go out there and say to maybe one of the big train like Hyundai, the train manufacturer or whatever, no, come and set it up in Scotland.
Yeah.
Because that's sorted by Westminster. You know, we don't have an aircraft factory. We don't have car factories. We don't have the train manufacturers. We don't have Siemens. Have got huge big places down in Lincolnshire that manufacture transformers. We don't get that.
Yeah.
Basically, what we've got is you got the oil. You got the oil industry support services.
Yeah.
You've got your whiskey. You're not getting any more.
Mm-hmm. So you don't reckon there's much more the Scottish Government could do to support business?
Well, there's they could put in a ferry service to the EU, reconnect us prior to it, but I've got some concerns there because I don't think the way they're doing it is right. But it's only a consultation.
Okay.
What I was approached by a company called Transfenica, who are a big multi-purpose ship operator. They operate between Finland, Poland, I think Estonia, down into Antwerp. But there was possibility that they would want to come in to Scotland, and they asked me to find out, so they could do their calculations.
Mm-hmm.
Can we find out the volumes that we move? The Scottish Government can't even tell us what our exports are, what volume is our exports, because that will be controlled, or it'll be through customs. It'll be a customs stat. But the UK is not interested in actually recording the stats for how much export Scotland send out.
Yeah, but it's I hear what you're saying. It's a reserve matter, and therefore, but it does seem to me that if we're going to go down the route of a referendum, that's the sort of data that needs to be made available to people.
Yes,
whether it cuts across the present lines, it's a moot point. But it needs to be gathered anyway. It seems to me there'll be a load of stuff like that. You have an idea in the note you sent me prior to our discussion that you feel that post-independence there ought to be a cross-party commission on the key issues like defence, EFTA/Brexit, currency, which would take in consultations with civil service and experts, but lock out lobbyists. Tell us about that.
I think it's a way to break the bottleneck in the discussions we're having in Scotland, because as soon as you engage with anyone, it's like, you can't do that, or no, you can't do that, or that's impossible. Because what they forget is independence gives you all the tools at your disposal to create the kind of country that you want. And there's certain things that I think would be more palatable to everybody if there was a pragmatic approach taken to it. And that includes, after independence, the people that voted Tory and Labour are going to be needing parties to vote for. They probably will still be called Labour and Tories, but as long as they're 100% controlled in Scotland and answerable to the people of Scotland only, then we need to work with them, and it would be good to have as many different ideas as possible.
And you're also in favour of making sure that we get contact with as many countries outside the UK as possible.
Yes. What we need to do is we need emissaries everywhere where we've got a huge diaspora. Get there, meet with the people, because these people, a lot of them left Scotland because they had no future.
Yeah.
They just went, you know what, it's rainy, we've not got prospects other than working in a coal mine or whatever, and they've went all over the world, and well, a lot of them were actually forced to go as well. It gets, that's written from history now. But we need to go there, and we need them to reconnect with the old country as such, and then we need them to talk to their elected officials over there to put pressure on their government to support us, because I guarantee you the UK will be chapping the doors of every country from America to Australia to Canada, New Zealand, saying, don't support the Scots.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting concept because it seems to me that there's two things that need to happen. One is you need to have negotiations with the Westminster government, and on some level, there has to be a meeting. Now, whether that meeting needs to be forced by having a Section 30 or having a general election that requires the UK government to come to the negotiating table, whatever other device might be appropriate, that's an internal thing. But it seems to be, you're absolutely right, there needs to be an external dimension to this, which is all about building bridges with countries outside the UK so that you can make an appeal to them during the negotiations, perhaps, or at some stage, maybe post-negotiations, whatever, to give them a chance to become involved in the process, because it's one thing to declare independence. It's quite another thing to have it accepted.
Well, that's where we should probably have a very basic sort of headline constitution that basically says this is a kind of country that we're going to be. A sort of defence policy. Are we going to maintain membership of NATO? A policy on EFTA or EU. So these countries know who they're going to be dealing with. The last thing they want to think of is Scotland. They might fear it just could be too socialist, or it could be too. We need to be pragmatic, because if they feel that, well, wait a minute, we've got businesses there, or we could put businesses there, but it's at risk of all their money being sucked away. We've just got to, as a nation, be pragmatic and put forward how we want to project ourselves on the world stage.
Yeah. I love this idea that you have. You say after independence, we ought to house civil servants and civil service in different cities. For example, Inverness for fisheries and agriculture, and Fries for energy, etc., etc. That sounds like a fantastically good idea to me.
Well, it should be. Well, the whole. Sorry, my dog's going.
That's okay.
The UK is the only country where your political, finance, and creative centres are focused in the one city. If you go to America, Washington DC is for capital, or the political capital. New York's your finance, and Los Angeles is your creative. And these things should all be spread out. We're a small country, so let's the spending and the work and the jobs that's created through independence in our own government institutions, why shouldn't they be spread around the country?
Yeah. One of your other ideas is that every SNP should take an oath to the people of Scotland and put those interests ahead of any other. Otherwise, it would be impractical to sit.
Yeah, anybody, any politician that takes their seat in the Scottish Parliament should be made to take an oath to the people of Scotland and it's the Scottish Parliament above party, above the UK state, above anything else.
Yeah.
They're elected by the people of Scotland, and they're accountable to the people of Scotland and nobody else.
Yeah, I mean, right now they have to swear an oath of allegiance to the head of state, who happens to be the Queen, and her successors. So that would be difficult to regard the Queen as sovereign, at the same time take the view that the people are sovereign.
But in Scotland, the people are sovereign.
Anyway, there's a precedent, as I pointed out in last week's show. 321 British parliamentarians are presently Irish citizens. To be an Irish citizen, you effectively have to sign up to the Irish Constitution. I'm paraphrasing now, it's not specifically phrased that way, but you have to obviously honour the Irish state and support its institutions. Otherwise, nobody's going to give you citizenship if your objective is exactly the opposite. So these people are happy to swear an oath of loyalty to the Queen and to be loyal to the Irish state. These would strike me as somewhat contradictory on the face of it.
I don't think they really care, but basically they're only doing it to get an Irish passport so that they don't need to wait 3 hours at Malaga.
But the point I'm making is the broad one, which is that I agree with that, by the way, no question. But the broader question is, people seem quite comfortable swearing to two different things, contradictory things at the same time.
Yeah, but
I know what you're going to say. They're politicians. I know.
Exactly. Do you honestly? They'll say anything just to get it done, just to make their life easier. Yeah, okay. There's no. I wouldn't say emotion, but there is no genuine belief in what they're signing up to. It's just that it's words to them.
Yeah.
As long as it makes their life easier.
Yeah. Maybe there ought to be a campaign to require all MSPs, if it's their wish, to sign up to these two things. Just the present oath plus another oath that says the Scottish people are sovereign.
Well, if they want to keep their oath to the Queen, then that's an argument for another day. At the end of the day, we just want to decide: do we want to be independent?
Okay.
Do we want to take the decisions to grow our country and make sure that our children and our children's children won't be deprived of any opportunities?
Yeah, got it. Now, in terms of the Scottish Government and the SNP approach to these things, do you think they should be more assertive?
Yeah, they need to take the wallies out and get the fangs in. I think we see it. We'll hold an independence referendum in 19th of October 2023, and immediately we've been faced with every scare story. We're making Putin happy. It's never going to happen. It's a pretended referendum. No, we really need to say we're going to have it. And if you're not going to give us it, then we need to look at something. We need a Great Salt March or the equivalent of a Great Salt March where we can challenge the UK authority peacefully in Scotland.
But isn't that exactly what Nicola Sturgeon has proposed? I.e. that if, as happened today, Boris Johnson wrote to her denying her a Section 30, that she says, if you do that, I will use the next general election as a plebiscite. And if that plebiscite returns a majority, then we will regard that as being effectively a referendum result. And we would then act on it.
They'll still not accept it. That's why we need friends out with the UK. We need the EU, but the EU is going to be pretty tied up with Ukraine, so they're not going to be focusing too much on Scotland. Then we need to look at America, Canada, anywhere that will listen to us and just say, well, you know what, you have democratically demonstrated that you want independence, and we'll support it.
I mean, personally, I feel it would be untenable for the Westminster government to continue as before. Now, I know when I say this, lots of people in the audience will be saying, look, that's not going to happen because the Keir Starmer has been quite clear. He will have no truck with SNP. He will not negotiate if it's a hung parliament, etc., etc., etc. I don't think that position is sustainable, by the way, but that's what he's saying. Now, so you've got the two main party leaders in Westminster saying, we won't negotiate. We won't even negotiate on democracy, never mind a referendum. And that, I mean, I suspect that hard line will not persist because it's unsustainable. But it does indicate where the negotiating position will start from. Yeah,
it's always good to, it's always, they're always going to take a hard line, but I think we also need to take a hard line and say, we're not going back. We're not going back in our box. For too many people in Scotland, the union doesn't work no more, and no more fake federalism or broken promises. If we're going to have a discussion about how we could, there's so many areas that we can be independent, but we can still work together on.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's like any business deal. You end up, it's a give and take thing. You know, people negotiate.
Well, you know, it's a good deal if, sorry, you know, it's a good deal if both parties walk away and they're not happy.
We've got a quick question. Career advice, I think, from Charles Smith. He's asking, are customs and freight forwarding only learned hands-on, or is there a career structure and a professional courses and qualifications?
It's hands-on. Basically, you learn from the ground up. Okay. Once you get into a freight forwarder or a logistics company, there are some industrial, or it's called the BIFA, the British Institute of Freight Association. They've got some courses that your employer can put you through, but most of it's learned just. Okay. It's just hands-on. You learn from doing the job. Okay. Well, that's great. Mark, it's been, as always, informative and educational talking with you. And I hope people have found it as entertaining as I have. Our hour is up. Our 60 minutes has gone. It fled. It did.
Just like that. And I hope everyone in the audience tonight enjoyed the show and your comments as much as I did. Thanks again. I'm just going to make a few concluding remarks. If you can stay online afterwards, that would be great. So there we go. All the questions you wanted to ask about freight forwarding and all else besides answered for you tonight by by Big Marky. Seek him out on Twitter. He always has something very useful and helpful in the subject today. A big thank you to all of you out there for joining us tonight. Hope you enjoyed the show. Next week, we're back at the same time, and we'll be talking to columnist Alistair Heather. Look out for that show. I'm sure it will be just like all the others. It'll be a great show to participate, and you can send your questions, of course, to Alistair either during the show or afterwards. As always, or before. As always, a reminder to look out for my column in the Sunday National this weekend. You'll find it in the 7-day supplement. I can tell you, this is breaking news ahead of time, I find myself agreeing with a former Tory minister who described Westminster as a cesspit. Now, I actually had a house in the country with a cesspit. And I have to tell you, he's doing a bit of a disservice to Cesspit. In closing, a further reminder that it's been another great day for British democracy. As someone very wise said, trying to decide who should replace Boris Johnson is like trying to decide which toilet to use at Glastonbury. God, that's not a thought I want to keep in mind for very often, very much longer. Another reminder, if just before we go, do donate to Indy Live. We do need your help. Please, whatever you're doing just now, put it to one side. You'll find all the details I hope they're up on the screen or available to you soon. Do go there, donate to Indy Live. We'll be terribly grateful to whatever you can provide. I know these are tough times. I know we're all in straitened circumstances, but we definitely would very much appreciate your help. And again, to all of you, thanks for joining us. Stay safe and take care. See you next week.